Welcome back to your home garage. Now, I just received my brake parts shipped in from rockauto.com, and I can't wait to change the rotors and pads on my 2005 F150. Safety first, so always wear protective gear such as gloves and eye protection. It's a good practice to open the brake fluid reservoir when changing brakes. This helps to release the pressure in the brake system and allows the brake piston to be retracted and compressed more easily. Now, some would say it's not necessary as the master cylinder is not airtight, but as brake shoes and pads wear down, most people add brake fluid to the reservoir. When new brakes are installed, if some fluid is not drained, it will most likely spill over. Also, place a couple of rags around the reservoir to catch any overflow. Chalk the back wheels to ensure the vehicle doesn't roll backwards. If your rims have center caps, just remove them to access the lug nuts. With a breaker bar and a 21mm socket, loosen the tire lug nuts by cracking them free, but don't remove them fully. What you're doing at this point is using the weight of the vehicle to stop the wheel from turning. This will make the removal of the tire a lot easier after you lift it up. Identify the front jack points, which will likely be the frame rails, and slowly raise the front end up. Secure two jack stands under the frame rails, then lower the vehicle slowly onto the stands. I'm just going to move this one slightly back so I have better clearance. I always leave the hydraulic jack under the vehicle for added safety, but the truck is truly resting on the jack stands. Now loosen the lug nuts and fully remove the tire. With the tire removed, you now have full access to the caliper. So use a 13mm socket and loosen the upper and lower two bolts on the back of the slide pins. Now, if the slide pins start to spin, just use a wrench to hold them while you remove both bolts. With both bolts removed, grab the caliper and rock it back and forth to remove it. Now this may take a little bit of time, but you'll get it loose. Then use an S-hook to hang the heavy caliper out of the way. This also prevents the brake hose from getting damaged. With a pair of pliers, remove the two pad clips that hold the pad away from the rotor. Remove both the front and back brake pads. If they happen to be a little bit difficult, just use a flathead screwdriver as a pry bar. With an 18mm socket, remove the two caliper bracket bolts. These are torqued on, so a breaker bar will likely be your friend in this situation to break them free. Then switch to a ratchet to speed up the process. Remove the bracket for cleaning and maintenance. Remove the rotor. If it doesn't want to come off, just give it a few taps with your hammer. With a wire brush, remove any debris off the hub. For any future maintenance, a light coat of copper anti-seize will help to prevent rust from bonding the rotor to the hub. I'm purposely going to place the rotor backwards to begin with because we had to clean it with brake clean, which removes the oil that protects the rotor before installation. And of course, make sure you clean the other side as well. With a standard screwdriver, pry off the old clips from the caliper bracket. My brake pads came with a new set, so I'm not worried about salvaging these ones. With a wire brush, remove any rust and debris that could affect the installation of the new clips. Now take the slide pins out by rotating them back and forth, and just keep the rubber dust shield in the bracket. But if it comes out, it's not an issue to put it back in. They might be a bit stiff, but just keep moving them back and forth until it releases. It is recommended that the pins go back in the same spot, so just do them one at a time so they don't get mixed up. With a brush, brake clean, and a rag, prep the slide pins by removing all the old grease before reapplying fresh lubrication. With silicone brake lubrication, coat the pins and slide them back into place. Make sure you inspect the rubber dust shield for any tears. If they are torn, replace them accordingly. Also, make sure the rubber dust shield is seated to the slide pin by sitting in the small groove. Repeat the same on the second slide pin. Place brake lubrication on the freshly brushed bracket locations where we'll be installing the new brake pad slide clips. Install the brake pad slide clips and use a screwdriver and hammer to just ensure it's seated properly so you can easily slide the brake pads in. Place the caliper bracket over the rotor and start threading in the caliper 18mm bolts in by hand, and then we'll use a ratchet. I'll torque these to spec shortly when I install the slide pin bolts. I'm going to bend the ears back on the new clips just a bit because I could tell they'll stop the brake pads from going into position. Apply a bit of brake lubricant to the end of the clips where the pads will make contact. This will help the pads slide back and forth a lot easier. But don't get any on the rotor. Now place your new pads in the slide clips. This will be a tight fit, so just take your time and adjust and bend the clip slightly if it's stopping the pad from being flush to the rotor. Do the same to the back pad. Install the two new pad clips that hold the pad away from the rotor. Here's a closer look at the positioning of those brake pad clips. Torque the caliper bracket bolts to 95 foot-pounds with your 18mm socket. With all the brake hardware on, we can now go ahead and prepare the caliper piston. Start by pushing the caliper piston into position with a compression tool of your liking. Take your time with this activity because the compressed piston is pushing fluid back into the brake line, into the master cylinder, and then to the reservoir. So if you go slowly, you won't have any issues. Make sure the piston is compressed all the way down because you'll need the full gap for your new rotor and pads. Slide the caliper over the brake pads. Thread the caliper bolts in by hand. Now you may need to push the slide pins in as they might block the caliper shell from sliding over the pads properly. Tighten the two bolts with a 13mm socket and ratchet. And then torque them to 25 foot-pounds. After torquing this last bolt, this will complete the driver's side. And here's the result of the same steps completed on the passenger side. After both sides have been completed, put on your tires, hand tighten the lug nuts, lower the vehicle, and then torque these in a star pattern to 150 foot-pounds. Also recheck the torque between 50 and 100 kilometers of driving. Eyeball your brake fluid level to make sure it's in between the min and max mark. And if everything looks good, just place your brake fluid cap back on and remove the rags. With the brakes done and the truck safely on the ground, pump the brakes slowly until it feels firm. There will be a gap between the pads and the rotor due to the new installation, and this will start to eliminate that gap. Ultimately, this moves the piston into place. There you have it. This is how easy it is to install brand new front rotors and pads on your Ford F-150. So make sure you help to keep this channel going by hitting that like button, sharing this video with a friend. Also, please comment below as I reply to all. Plus, don't forget to subscribe. And we'll see you next time in your home garage.